Welcome to Butterflies of Wisdom, everyone. And today I'm lucky enough to have returning guest Jenn Taylor. Jenn Taylor is a foster parent. She's also a podcaster now. She is a woman of many hats. But the reason why I'm bringing Jenn back on is because she was making this podcast a year and a half and a year in making, and no one knew she had it until I convinced her to go over to Lipson, which I use to host Butterflies of Wisdom. So without further ado, I'm going to Miss Jenn, take it away.
Thank you. So yes, the podcast was between 12 and 18 months in the making, and it wasn't something I mentioned very often because it wasn't live yet. I had already banked about 10 podcast interviews when I spoke with you last, and I'd heard a lot about Libsyn, and that's kind of the direction I was going. And then after our interview, when I told you, I actually have a podcast kind of ready to go, I just haven't, you actually gave me a timeline and challenged me, which was kind of a kick in the butt that I needed. And you let me know that Libsyn was the platform that you used. And so that was kind of the final nail in the coffin, so to speak. So I activated my Libsyn account, and I got everything transferred over there. And in your timeline challenge, I actually launched the podcast and went live.
Good. And I have it in my feed, and yours truly has been on Jenn's podcast. As soon as she told me, I said, well, can you interview me? Because being on a podcast is being on other people's podcasts is more important than hosting your own podcast, just because you need to get it out there. So why were you hiding this secret? That's what I want to know, and that's what all my listeners want to know. Why were you hiding this from all of us?
I think I was doing a lot of things at the same time. I launched my business a year ago. I wrote the book, and that was released in August. And my website, I coach predominantly women who have survived physical and sexual abuse. And so I was shifting gears the last couple of years from foster care into the actual adults who have maybe been through some of that trauma. And I've written for years. I've been a public speaker for over 20 years. And what I liked about the podcast idea was it kind of took my writing and my public speaking, and it married them. And it was a way for people to give their story a voice without being overwhelming. But launching something new and putting yourself out there is always a little bit scary. And so I was trying to actually get like 50 podcast interviews banked before I went live, because I felt insecure basically about launching and having to make sure that I maintained all those interviews. But I did it anyway, and I launched an About Me podcast and 3 others all at once on my open day, so 4 total. And then I do 1 a week. And so I already have things booked for like a month and a half. I mean, I already have the podcast done, and I keep emailing people, and people keep saying yes, and I just keep doing interviews. And so I think fear was what held me back. But it's one of my favorite things to do, is to interview people. So I don't know. It seems silly now that it's done, but sometimes you need a kick in the butt.
Yes. And as Jenn could tell you, I could be your guys' kick in the butt if you need it, because a lot of people say, I want to launch a podcast, and then they say, oh, this is not as easy as I thought. And like, really? And then they pod fade, and it's like, really? And no, I just had a podcast, and so I thought pod fade on me yesterday, and he produced a really good podcast, And I'm like, what happened to you? I don't see you in my feed anymore. And he's like, oh, I can't do that anymore because of the success of my business. I'm like, good for you, but still.
Yeah, it's hard to balance, and I think sometimes when you bring on one thing, something else has to go. And so I don't write for other people anymore, and I haven't for quite a while. I actually have kind of let my blog go, it's been there for 5.5 years. And I really love the coaching, and I really love podcasting. Those are my two main focuses. If I get asked to public speak, I still love that, and I'll do it. But it kind of has to fit into life. And right now I kind of want to help other adults who have been through a lot of trauma, and then help people who have really struggled but maybe won't write a book or won't have their own podcast or aren't quite the entrepreneurial spirit. They can use the podcast to just get their story out and their information out. So it's really fun. But, yeah, I mean, I get it. Sometimes something has to give. We can only spread ourselves so thin.
Yep. But, you guys, this podcast and Jen's podcast hopefully will not pod fade. Mine will definitely not. Wisdom of Fashion will definitely not. That's my other podcast. And the Spirit of 622, which is also my other podcast, will be going under rebranding in the next 2 years. I just have to focus on my journalism degree. But so I can only keep one podcast going, and Butterflies of Wisdom is it. And so Butterflies of Wisdom will not pod fade, I promise you guys, because I've noticed a lot of these great podcasts that I have in my feed have pod faded or not in existence. So, Jen, what is the best advice for new podcasters who, I don't know how to put this, who don't want to take the leap?
Well, I think fear is what basically holds us back in one way or another. So I think you have to kind of bust through that. I think you need to look at what the worst case scenario is in everything that you do. You put yourself on the line and you let people know you're doing something. And then the worst case scenario is for one reason or another, it fails. You stop doing it. And that's embarrassing. And I think if that's the worst case scenario, who cares? Just do it anyway. Because most people can't make that step. The step from I want to write a book or I want to start a podcast or I want to start my own business to actually doing it. I think about 85% of the people don't take that step. So take that step. If the worst case scenario is you don't keep doing it and you're a little embarrassed, then honestly, people don't notice that about you as much as you think they do. So just do it. It's a learning curve, and if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Yes. And I was going to say, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And if you people want me to be your accountability buddy, you guys know where to find me, and I'll even give you my phone number at the end here and my cell phone, so you guys can text me away and say, I need help. How do I do this? And when it comes to writing a book, because I don't know if you heard Jen's story previously, but my God, she's a woman of many hats now, and 90% of podcasts are consumed mobilely. No one has time to sit down at their computers anymore and listen to a podcast.
Yeah, and you know what? That was a big part of it. I think, the hardest part of doing it, or the advice I'd give somebody, but then also depend on the people around you. So, I had you as my final kick in the butt, but you were the final kick in the butt. There were other kicks before that. And you actually have a lot of people that support you more than you realize. People aren't always as critical as you think they're going to be, and people are more supportive than you think they're going to be. So when someone offers, like you just did, hey, if you want to do this, ask for my help. When people say that to me, when you said that to me, I did. I said, okay, this is where I'm at and this is what I need help with. We can't all be good at everything. And you need to use the people around you that are offering their help and their expertise. Those are your resources. It doesn't make you less than. because you're utilizing help from other people. It makes you stronger together.
Exactly. And I just feel like you're another great podcast host and you're another great resource. So where can people find you and how can people get a hold of your podcast? And yes, your podcast is in iTunes, I know it. And where can people get a hold of you and how can people get on your podcast and share their stories or just listen to your podcast?
Well, iTunes, everywhere. My name is Jenn Taylor, JennTaylor. The podcast is Jenn Taylor, #rerouting, on iTunes. It's also, my website is jenntaylor.net. That's actually the way. If you go into jenntaylor.net, you can find every social media. My podcast has a page. You can do a contact sheet to that. So whether you want to be on my podcast, and I love it when people ask to be on the podcast. I think there's some hesitation. We all think, oh, well, my story maybe isn't as good as the next person's story. Nope, they're all equally as amazing. So don't let that hold you back. Just send out a contact and email through jenntaylor.net, and I'll get you on the podcast, and it will be fun. I promise.
Yes. Jenn Taylor or myself do not bite. So if you guys want to be on my podcast, you can just fill out information in the show notes and I'll get you on my podcast. That being said, I'm booked out pretty much until July now. Thank you very much. But this episode goes out today. So if you want to be on this podcast, just contact my producer, Danielle, and she's very responsive at email, very responsive at text. She also has cerebral palsy, so her spelling may be a little bit wonky, but she's very responsive at text. She's very responsive on email. And if you guys want to text me privately, my phone number is 970-618-8840, and I'm in Mountain Standard Time, and I'll be your accountability buddy, just like I was for Jenn. And Jenn, I want to ask you, do you have any questions for me that I can help you with today live on this podcast?
Wow. I wasn't prepared for this, Wen. Yeah, I do have a question. I have a question on how the Books for Books is going and your new journalism degree. Yay, that you're starting this fall.
Yay.
You're launching a lot. Well, yay. So what's happening with that?
Well, the Books for Books are going well. And for those of you guys who don't know what Books for Books is, it's because, as you guys know, in education, those Pell Grants and those student loans can only cover so much. So what Jenn and I came up with is, if you buy my book sales will go towards my textbooks, and it will go towards purchasing my books on Kindle and purchasing the actual textbooks, because 9 times out of 10 professors don't put their own books on Kindle, or authors don't put their own books on Kindle, and 9 times out of 10 these professors don't pick books that are easily handicapped and accessible. That's my biggest fight right now, is to get books that I can read mobilely, or I can have someone read to me. Like, I'm sitting right now looking at a huge textbook, the St. Martin's Guide for Writing, and that's an actual textbook. That's not on Kindle by any means. So any professors out there listening, please try and stick your books on Kindle. And any professors who are picking books for their freshman college classes, please try and pick one's on Kindle for everyone, but especially for the disabled. And so if you buy my books, that will go towards college textbooks for me. And so that's what Books for Books is, and Jenn and I came up with that. Jenn gets more credit than I do.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, when we use each other as resources, even just sharing ideas and bouncing ideas off each other, it's kind of astounding what we all come up with. And so, again, always reach out. There's no shame in that.
And I appreciate you, Jenn, for coming on this podcast and sharing your podcast. And I hope to help you in the future with your podcast. And again, everyone, if you want me to be your accountability buddy, just email me, and just email Danielle if you want to be on the show, or reach out via the website. We're very accessible, almost too accessible. And as Jenn said, please reach out to her. She loves when people reach out to her. And please, 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 on both Jenn's books and my books, leave a review on Amazon, and please leave a review for any podcast you listen to, because it helps with the iTunes rankings. And for those of you that don't know, iTunes New and Noteworthy doesn't help, because you can be in iTunes New and Noteworthy anytime. Just Apple picks iTunes New and Noteworthy, so it's more about the content, less reviews. But the more reviews we get, the better it helps in the iTunes algorithm. And just keep sharing these incredible independent podcasts like myself and Jenn. And thanks, guys, for tuning in to another fabulous episode. This podcast has been sponsored by KITV. On what they will do is you compose a tweet, or they compose a tweet for you. But the cool thing about Kidda is they put the trending hashtag for you with the tweet, so you don't get lost in the heap. And I want to thank Jenn for coming on and sharing a little bit about her podcast. And Jenn, any closing thoughts?
Just believe in yourself, guys.
Well, that's a beautiful way to close out this episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks to you guys.